Good evening. So tonight I have a two-topic video. In the first part of the video, I want to make a few more remarks to our plantations in East Africa. Just for the sticklers of detail, to give a little bit more of a background, because I forgot something to mention in the first video I made the other day in reference to Joe and this whole gesto thing. Not directly with that, but to clarify some relationships in Tanzania if it comes to the plantations, and I have a few pictures for you we can throw in here. In the second part of the video, I want to talk about of what happened here with J.D. Vance in Munich on Friday and then what followed over the weekend, and his meeting with the lady from the AFD, and my personal skepticism of the AFD and why I think that the AFD is not the most suitable party for Germany either, and I will go into the detail of it, of why I'm not a big fan of that group of people. But let me get started with East Africa. Now, I said we had the plantation in Usambara, and there were coffee plantations, and that is correct. And I dug up a couple more names and towns, out of the archives here I got. And I also forgot to mention is we had for a short period of time also a latex rubber plantation right on the northeastern foothill of the Kilimanjaro, in the deepest jungle, so to speak. And I wanted to give you a little bit background on that. And then also there is a museum in Berlin that is called the Ethnological Museum, and it is part of the Museen of Berlin's. So the Ethnological Museum got a collection of photographs and artifacts and all that stuff dating back to the colonial days, which was accomplished or accumulated there, and it is on display there. One of the things they have on display at the museum and online on their website is some photographs a German photographer by the name of Bernhard, I have to read this because I could never remember all these names, Bernhard Demburg, Demburg. He had traveled there with an entourage to Tanzania. I think that was somewhere between 1908 and 1914, before World War I, and he took some pictures there. We're going to look a few of them at those. And those are from a plantation which also was called Prinz Albrecht Plantation, but they were growing sisal algaves. That is those plants, they almost look like pineapples, when they grow out of the ground and they get the leaves on top of it, but much larger. And sisal is actually used to make yarn and ropes and mats and that sort of stuff out of it. The reason why that plantation was called Prinz Albrecht Plantation was because we licensed our name. That was not very uncommon. For instance, in Berlin, the Gestapo headquarters on Prinz Albrecht Straße 8 was in the Prinz Albrecht Hotel. That was not our hotel. That was originally built, I think, around 1870 or 1880, and it was the Four Seasons. Then the owners changed a couple of times around 1890 or 1900, somewhere around there. And it was right around the corner from our Prinz Albrecht Palais, which we did own. But we did not own the hotel, never did. However, one of the new owners then around 1900 asked my second great-grandfather for permission if he could name the hotel Prinz Albrecht Hotel. And they granted that to him, and that was the name until the Gestapo moved in 1934. They had expropriated this from the rightful owner of the hotel, And they took, of course, our name then down. This was no longer the Prinz Albrecht Hotel. This was then just the Gestapo headquarters with the torture chambers at the in the basement where the kitchen and that sort of stuff used to be. They converted this whole building over for their police force, and they tortured and killed people there. This is part of the topography of terror of the museum they established there today when you go to Berlin and visit. I just wanted to explain this. My friend Richard Brook in San Diego, he comes from Ratibor, which is Ratzibor in Upper Silesia. And his second great-grandfather, Samuel Bruck, who was a Jewish Prussian, he opened the Prinz von Preußen Hotel in Ratibor about 4 years after the railroad got established there, which connected Berlin with Vienna. Ratibor was on that main line, and people would stop there and then travel on to Vienna the next day. The railroad started to operate in 1845, and he opened the hotel up that was brand new. It was built in around 1849, 1850 was the opening. Richard Strauss Jr., I believe, performed there for the opening ceremony, and then Wilhelm IV stayed there shortly thereafter and all of this. So we did this, not just with most people. If they would ask us, we would license the name out. And this is the case with the Prinz Albrecht Plantation. And the Sisal plantations, where we're going to look at the pictures here in a minute, they were in Kihuhui, in it's almost central Tanzania, which is suitable from the land and from the climate to grow these type of plants. You can harvest them twice a year. It is not a very fast-paced business, the growing, the harvest, or then the fabrication or the cutting off these, Algavian leaves, basically into single strands. I think you get like 60 out of one leaf. You get 60 strands out of it, and you can weave them together then to make a piece of rope or yarn. And they're making mats and that sort of stuff out of it. And the owners of that plantation, which was called Prinz Albrecht Plantation, but was not ours, was Horst von Hahn, H-A-R-N, no, Horn, H-O-R-N, and Richard Siemers, S-I-E-M-E-R-S. Those two gentlemen, they were the owners of that plantation. They operated it. They did everything what comes with it. Our general manager for the entire operations, we had primarily the coffee and the latex farm or latex plantation, was a Mr. Feilke, F like Frank, E-I-L-K-E. He was the general manager, and he was located, our main office was located in Tanga, which is the northernmost coastal town in Tanzania with a port at that time. And the German colonial administration in that colony in East Africa had requested money from the Prussian Diet in Berlin, basically the parliament, the Prussian parliament, to build a railroad. So the German taxpayers at that time, around late 1880s, they had to cough up their tax Reichsmark or Goldmark to build a railroad in Tanzania. And that railroad went from Tanga, T-A-N-G-A, that's how that is spelled, that town is still there today, went through alongside the Usambara Mountains to a town called Kwamko, which still exists today. And that was the final stop from where you could go to the plantations we had uphill in the mountains. It was a hike. From there, you were also able to go to the latex plantations on the foothills of the Kilimanjaro. They are on the northeastern corner quadrant of the Kilimanjaro, right on the border to Kenya. And the interesting thing is, this is today located, or it is the Rongai route, which the visitors today use to reach the Simba camp on their hike up to the summit of Kilimanjaro. The entire hike from Kwamkoro takes about 9 days. So from Kwamkoro to our old plantations, which were called, now I wrote this down here. I had it written down here somewhere. The Simba camp. Yeah, that area, that plantation area is called Samanga, and that is basically right next to the Simba camp on that Rongai route. And it will take you about 4 days from Kwamkoro to hike through the rainforest or the jungle to that plantation where we grew, or where we had rubber trees planted to harvest latex, that milky stuff that comes out of it. And that did not go very well. For one, is the temperature in the summertime in that area is about 40 degrees Celsius, and with almost 100% humidity. Then you have malaria problems with the mosquitoes in that standing water puddles they got from the rain showers. And the primary animals to be encountered at that point, there was a lot of wildlife. This is no longer there because of the excessive hunting which took place then later on. And today with the tourists, they're saying that there's about 50,000 tourists each year hiking up on the Kilimanjaro mountain to the summit on top of it. And well, the story here was with the latex was that the baboons, monkeys, the baboons, they're the ones with the red butt cheeks, and the males are very aggressive, would come and turn and flip over the collecting bottles or little trays which are mounted on the tree underneath the cut to basically collect the latex. So when they hiked back up there to collect all of this stuff, then they saw that the monkeys, the baboons, had turned off over all that stuff. They must have felt that this was an intrusion into their territory, and they aggressively fought this. On the other hand, as we had for the coffee plantation, 2 assistant planters, that's what they were called. They were sort of the managers at the 2 coffee plantations. One was a Mr. H. Fearling, V like Victor, I-E-R-L-I-N-G, and a Mr. Windrops, W-Y-N-D-R-O-P-S, may have been a Dutchman. So each one of these 2 were sort of the on-site managers of the coffee plantations. And I believe Feeling's predecessor was the one who started the caoutchouc stuff up there on the Kilimanjaro. This went from about, I wouldn't say sea level, I would say the elevations is around 400 meters to 1,800 meters in height, where you can grow that latex stuff, where they set this up. And he went there. And back in those days, they still had black rhinos. The black rhinos are the big rhinos with the 2 horns on it. And his predecessor got killed because one of these rhinos started a stampede. And these rhinos can go about 35 to 50 miles an hour. And he got basically picked up. That animal charged him. The rhino charged at him, picked him up by the horn, threw him in the air, and then he landed, broke several ribs and bones, and then the animal went ahead and stepped on him with his big feet, and he basically passed away pretty much instantaneously. He was buried there where this happened. So this was one of the very few fatalities we have. Now, they killed the rhino then, but it took the traveling parties who attended this excursion up there to collect the latex too long, and the bullets were too small. They had on these rifles, on the old-fashioned rifles in the late 19th century. Those weren't high-powered rifles, what we have today. It took several shots at the rhino, and then eventually they killed the rhino. There was a Hungarian nobleman by the name of Count Teleki, Teleki, and he was the one who did a very early expedition into Tanzania, and he discovered Lake Victoria up there and this whole area around Kilimanjaro. And the story goes that he killed himself 89 of these black rhinos, and that is part of it why they're extinct today in Tanzania. You can't find any more black rhinos there, and I don't think they have repopulated them. Black rhinos are very dangerous people. The other animal you will encounter is about 10 different species of monkeys. Leopards, you won't have any lions or elephants. They usually are staying further north in Kenya, in the flatlands there. They don't come up that far into the mountains. The leopards, and then you're going to have, small animals, lots of birds, mangoes, that kind of stuff. Pigs, they have these Guinea pigs or Guinea pigs, larger pigs, but they're like wild boar to a certain extent. And then you have snakes, poisonous snakes, and you have venomous spiders in that area. So this is a very difficult thing. Plus, it was very difficult to carry the harvested latex, which is very heavy. If you have ever collected rubber, natural rubber in its raw form, or a sheet of rubber, even in a thin thickness, that rubber is itself pretty heavy. And they have filled up buckets, which the native people carried with a shoulder device, and they had to hike 4 days back to this town of Kwamkoro. I don't deal with these stuff here every day, but I thought I'm going to put it together for you. So they had to travel them back to Kwamkoro, where they then were filled into barrels, and then they put it on the railroad. That was a narrow track railroad, I think a 1 meter wide track system. And then it went all the way up to Tanga to be shipped over to Germany. And that was for the beginning of the rubber baron business in Germany. Continental, should ring a name for all the car enthusiasts, was one of the main customers we had for that rubber until they decided to not do it anymore because of the complexity. And there was no way to build the railroad all the way from Kwamkoro back all the way up to the plantation, to the latex plantation, to the rubber plantation. That 4-day hike was just too much. So that's how that went out. One thing I want to say is the ladies, the native ladies, they're topless. And the reason is we went there for business. We were not missionaries. So we left the native people wearing their clothing of their choice. So if they wanted to be topless, they were topless. Of course, that was more pleasant for us men. You probably can call me now a male chauvinistic pig, and I'm okay with this. But we were not, missionaries. We didn't want to save these people, neither did we say them, explain to them what they had to do or not. They were basically at liberty to be the way they wanted to be. What I found interesting, what I found in some of the stuff we have used, some of these ladies, then the native ladies, traveled to Tanga, to the city, and they saw for the first time white ladies, German ladies, and the German ladies, they all had these white blouses, this nice fabric and everything, and they were using their money. So they would go on the railroad and they would buy the blouses the German women were wearing because they were absolutely excited about this. So they did this on their own. They just thought that looked elegant and they were just absolutely ecstatic. There's also one more little story to this, is There is a native tribe which does today in that northern part there of the Kilimanjaro mountain. I forgot now what they were called. But they do today, they're these guides who guide the hikers up the summit. And back then, the tribal leader was or became friends with my great-granduncle because he had taken over the whole operation in 1906 when my second great-grandfather passed away, and he traveled there. And he had traveled there in his uniform because he belonged to the Queen Victoria Guard in Berlin of the Kaiser Wilhelm. And the tribal leader was so fascinated by his uniform with the pickle helmet and everything that came with it. So my great-granduncle left that uniform with him. He gave him the uniform. He was wearing another clothes because he had another set of clothes with it. This was in the at the time when they started to decide no longer to do the latex stuff. Basically, it was around 1908, 1910. It just was too difficult, and that tragic accident with that rhino had happened and that sort of thing, so they stopped it. And from my understanding is that family of that tribal leader is still in possession of Friedrich Heinrich's, of my great-granduncle's uniform, with helmet, sword, pants, shoes, socks, and the shirt and jacket. The whole rigmarole. Anyway, it's a story. If this is true or not, I don't know. That's what I was told by a friend of mine in Kansas City who traveled over to Tanzania in 1995, and he had visited. He told me that story. Unfortunately, he didn't take a picture of it. I would have loved to see that uniform, but that's what he told me. Anyway, stories, we said everything straight for the record. This video is now 22 minutes long, and I'm going to do a separate video, I think, about the Munich Security Conference and the AfD tomorrow. So we will see you tomorrow again. You have a good night.